You are listening to Olegana Travel Boutique, Trips and Stories podcast, where we share custom-made itineraries we have curated for our clients, stories from our own, often crazy adventures around the world, interviews with the most fascinating people we met on the road, plus tips and hacks that will help you plan your next adventure to Europe and beyond. Hi everyone, I am so excited to record this episode today. Well, for several reasons. First of all, I'm having one of my best friends, Tanya, join me today as a co-host. Yay! So excited. Second, we're going to talk about Italy, our absolute favorite country in Europe that we both can't get enough of. After a few months of quarantine, Italy is finally open to visitors. Yes, there's still a travel advisory to Italy for US citizens at the time of recording this episode, so we still can't go there. However, please keep on checking the news about the travel ban so you have the most accurate information before you start making your travel plans. I am already planning a few client trips to Italy for next spring and summer, and I have my fingers crossed that we will be able to travel there very, very soon. So, without further ado, drum roll please for one of my closest friends, my travel partner for the last 16 years, my fellow everything Italian fan, Tanya. Welcome to the show. So excited to have you here. Tell our listeners a little bit about who Tanya is.
Sounds good. Okay, so who am I? That is a really, really good question these days. Honestly, I'm someone who's missing travel terribly, and you know me, you know this about me.
Yeah.
I'm also I'm a mom. So I'm a mom to an amazing, curious 4.5-year-old. He's full of energy. He's full of curiosity. He loves to travel. I'm really thankful he shares my travel bug. I'm happy to say, so I think he's been to more countries by the time he was 4 than I've been in my 20s. So I feel like I'm a proud travel mama. I'm doing my job. I'm introducing him to other cultures. I'm trying to take him all over the world with my amazing husband, as much as we can, of course. We've been very lucky so far to have the privilege to travel, and we try to really take advantage of it while we can. Although recently, as I'm sure you've seen the news, we've been at home and quarantining, and we haven't really been able to travel as much, unfortunately. But I am so happy to be on today with you. I'm happy to have you as my best friend and travel partner extraordinaire. You are the person that I always call about all my crazy travel ideas. And hey, how about we go to Malta, or how about we go to Norway and see the fjords? And you've been a fantastic planner for all things travel related for me, period.
Thanks, hon. I love you too. I'm so excited to have you. And finally, we made it happen. I know through this quarantine and being a full-time mom and working and doing all this stuff, it's been in the works for quite a few months. So I'm finally happy we're sitting down to do this.
We're sitting down virtually.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Not seeing each other for the last, I don't even know, I lost count how long we haven't seen each other, living 10 minutes away from each other.
I know. That's been really hard. And just a quick side note for our listeners. So I met two of my favorite people in the whole world through travel. So my husband, Russ, who I met on a trip to Canada, and you, Anna, I met in Spain.
Yep, that's true. And it's totally crazy. I was just doing quick math in my head earlier. It's the summer. It's been 16 years since we met. Jesus, I didn't think we were that old to have that kind of milestones.
Yeah, we're getting old. We're getting old there.
Oh, man. But, we do have a fascinating story of how we met. And I really cannot resist not to tell it. So I hope our listeners will enjoy it. So this is how the story goes. Like I said, we met 16 years ago. We were in the same undergraduate program in New York City, but we hadn't met in our school before. We didn't know each other. We were part of the same college, and we were part of the same study abroad program in Salamanca, Spain. And like I said, we didn't know each other in New York. Our first encounter was completely by chance. It was in a crowded plaza in Salamanca. And to preface that, so I had a pretty stressful experience my first 24 hours after I landed in Spain. So it was my first study abroad, my first trip overseas, the first time going to a foreign country with a passport and everything. I was I'm not going to say how old I was, but you can probably do the math. Since we were in college. And so I landed in Spain, and we all had rented apartments for the duration of our college abroad program, but I could not get into my apartment when I arrived. I was supposed to be sharing it with a few roommates, and I couldn't get a hold of the landlord. And obviously I didn't have any information about the roommates, so I had nowhere to go. I ended up spending my first night in Spain at a completely different place because I had nowhere of going, but I did meet a few girls from the same program on the plane, and we kind of made friends. And when we landed in Madrid, and they got hold of their landlord, but I couldn't get hold of mine, I ended up going with them to their apartment. Luckily, they had a spare couch. So actually, it wasn't even a couch, it was a bed. They had a spare bedroom. So I spent the first night with them, but I was at a loss. I had no idea what to do. I couldn't afford to pay for another apartment. I was in a foreign country by myself. I did not speak Spanish beyond like the first few words that I learned that semester in school. I didn't know anyone. I was like pretty stressed out. And that next day, like the first day of school, after the classes, I was just walking from, I remember I was walking from the university building through the main plaza. If for those who have been to Spain know that every city is built around the central plaza, like a central square. I was so stressed out. Like I think I was like in my own world thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? Like I can't even call my parents and tell what's going on because they're just going to like send someone to pick me up and bring me home. And that was not what I wanted to do. So I was walking through this plaza, and randomly I heard these two girls speak Russian. Out of all the languages in the world, I heard them speak Russian. And for those of you who know me, like Russian is my native language. And I heard them speak Russian. And those girls were Tanya and her friend. And, you know, I don't even remember your friend's name anymore. It's been so long, and we kind of lost touch with her. But hearing that, like, your native tongue in a country of full of foreigners, and having that super stressful first day, I gravitated towards you guys, you know. I don't even remember what I asked you. And I do remember we ended up going to the cafe together, having lunch. It turned out that you guys were from the same program. I was like, oh my God, this is so great. I can, you know, make some new friends. And I told you guys the story, how I wasn't able to get into the apartment. And Tanya and her friend told me a story that they actually had a spare room in their apartment, and that their roommates didn't show up. So they're like, you know what? You're welcome to stay for free in our apartment with the spare room. Like, we're not going to charge you anything. I was like so excited and relieved. Like, I just met these cool girls from my city speaking my language. They're offering me to stay with them. Like, it sounds crazy. Like in 2020, I probably would not have done that. But when you're in college, like, you do crazy things. And when they gave me the address of the apartment where they were staying, the craziest thing ever happened, because that was the apartment where I was supposed to stay originally, and I was their roommate that didn't show up last night. How the heck the fate happened and turned around for us to meet randomly at the square, because they also, like, you guys also couldn't get into the apartment, right? Like, I think you told me you waited like till late at night on, like, literally on the footsteps of the building until the landlord appeared. But you were with a friend, so it was two of you, so you kind of, like, you know, didn't have to do it by yourself. I was by myself, so I just ended up going with the other girls I met. But, you know, like, the rest is history. But, like, how I still can't believe it. Like, every time I think about that, I'm like, how crazy that we met completely randomly in the middle of Spanish Plaza.
Right.
And then, like, we just, like, instantaneously clicked, and we had the best time in Spain. Like, we traveled every weekend. I totally call it that it was a party abroad, not study abroad. And, like, we've been friends ever since. Like, it's just absolutely mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Honestly, it's silly as it sounds. I think things happen for a reason. I think it was always meant to be. And yeah, I mean, we totally had an amazing summer program in Spain. We made a lot of fun memories. We learned a lot. My Spanish improved. But yeah, it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy because we had a hard time, like you said, getting into the apartment, and we were a little nervous. And I think just meeting someone, from New York, from home, who spoke the same language was like incredible. And the rest is history. 15 years ago, was
Mm.
it? 20 years ago? I don't know.
Yeah, and it's a lot has happened for both of us in the last 16 years. Obviously, we're not in college. Now we're both moms. We both live in Jersey, 10 minutes away from each other. Meanwhile, like when we were in college, I lived in Brooklyn, you lived in Queens.
Right.
We now have toddler boys, both sons who are pretty much the same age. So we continue having a lot in common. And I think the thing that we had the most in common during this quarantine time is that we pretty much spent all day, like all of free time, talking on text, either complaining how hard it is to be a mom during quarantine or talking how we like miss travel and how we need to like literally run away for a long weekend to Italy once this pandemic is over, because it's just like it's been a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Venice is calling both of our names for
Oh,
sure for a long girls' weekend. I can't wait.
yes, absolutely. And speaking of Venice, I was thinking that during the 16 years of being friends, we've traveled a ton together. Like we've been obviously to Spain, and then we went with our husbands to Ireland and Croatia and England and Switzerland and Mexico, Costa Rica. Like I probably like missed a bunch of other places, but the only place that left undeniable mark on our souls is Italy. Not to say that other places we don't care for, but for some reason, when we think back of our trips, we're always thinking of Italy. And I've been to Italy a few times before our first trip together to Milan of February last year. But for you, Tanya, it was the first time in Italy. And I think our listeners would be curious to listen and hear what was your experience like for the first time in Italy in February, nonetheless. And for the most part, you were exploring it by yourself because we went for a conference that I was participating in. So I only had probably the first 36 hours in the country, like when we landed, and we didn't sleep, and we just like were like these crazy tourists trying to do everything.
Right.
After the red eye flight, and we had a tour, and we went shopping, and we had food, obviously. But for the most part, the rest of the time you spent by yourself, while I was at a conference. So what was your experience like the first time?
Well, I think, as you mentioned, so Italy in February. So first of all, I think I'd like to say that really there's no bad time to visit Italy, because Italy is just beautiful. It's magnificent. It's one of my favorite places in the world. Like you said, we've been to many countries. A lot of them have been sort of off the beaten path before they were kind of cool and swanky, like Croatia and Costa Rica, and Norway was beautiful. But I think Italy is just special. It holds a really magical place in my heart. And I'm just so excited to be back, hopefully sometime next year, if it all works out. So the first time I went to Italy was to Milan, and Milan is spectacular. So thank you for arranging the tours. The tours were fantastic. Even though I was alone throughout the day, like you said, I really got to enjoy the city. I'm an introvert, so I really don't mind spending time alone, walking around, getting acquainted with a new place. So that was really enjoyable. So, of course, the highlights, the Duomo and seeing the Last Supper, Da Vinci's Last Supper, that was absolutely incredible. I have photographs that I still look at back, on my phone to this day. I just look back and smile and remember that fantastic time. It was incredible. There was also, for those of you who love Da Vinci as much as I do, I'm sort of a history freak, and any kind of historical inventions and things like that are really cool. So Da Vinci exhibits were really cool in Milan. So they had real life models that were from his famous notebooks, if you know anything about him at all. So he had a whole bunch of really incredible innovation for his day. And they had scientists and engineers recreate some of the stuff live in person at the museum, and they had some of the notebooks you can actually look at, and it was interactive. It was fantastic. So if it's still there, the exhibit, next time you visit Milan, that's definitely someplace I recommend highly, just to walk through the path of Da Vinci from 500 years ago. That was absolutely incredible. And so one of the other things I got to do, which I thought was really cool, so after the Last Supper, I went to visit his residence and sampled some of the wine that was actually grown from the same kind of grapes that he had in his garden back in the day. So I think through magic of science, they were able to harvest or actually, find some of the seeds from the grapes and grow them in the yard and make some wine, which was actually pretty delicious. So that was one of the things that I really enjoyed.
That sounds
I'm
pretty
just
cool. I
gonna
wish I was at the wine tasting with you instead of the conference.
Yeah, the wine tasting was just really amazing. The garden was beautiful, and just to be in the same space was really cool. And it felt like with Milan, I feel like there's a lot of really modern, cool things, but also a lot of history, and you feel like you're walking back in like medieval Italy sometimes. So it's just like really really fun, for those of you who like that kind of thing. So the other thing I did was I took a really cool, fantastic day trip to Verona, which really, I think in all of Italy had some of the best pizza. And people that have been other places will probably kill me for saying that. I think every place in Italy, every city will claim like, oh, we have the best pizza. But I think from what I've tasted across Italy on that trip and the following trip, Verona really had fantastic pizza.
Speaking
And
of pizza, sorry to interrupt.
yeah, no, it's okay.
Since we are both obsessed with Venice, somebody who lives in Venice that I met at one of the conferences told me not to ever get pizza in Venice. Like Venice and pizza are not friends, and only touristy places sell like mediocre pizza. They're like, we don't eat pizza in Venice. I was like, what? How is this a thing? But apparently it is.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's funny enough. I think when you and I went to Venice, I don't think we had pizza.
No, we had all
So
kinds of
that,
stuff,
yeah,
cicchetti and
right.
seafood. Because Venice is on water, so it has like the freshest seafood. So we ate a lot of that.
Right. Yeah, I don't remember having pizza. I'm sure it's good, but if they say, hey, don't try the pizza in Venice, then that's probably good local advice.
Yeah.
So back to my Milan trip for a moment. So the other thing I did, which was really fun, was a boat trip on Lake Garda. And Lake Garda is really a destination I think people hear about the most in the summer. It's a beautiful summer vacation spot. There are a lot of really picturesque towns around the coast. But I mean, in February, it was fantastic. So there's so much. Italy has so much to offer really in any season. Each region is unique. The weather is different. You can discover incredible things really throughout the year. So, and one of the things, back to the local flavor for a second, that's one of the things I love the most about Italy. And again, thanks to you, through your connections on the ground, we really had local, fantastic, amazing travel guides and tour companies. So we were always met very warmly, had authentic, off the beaten path experiences. And this is something that I love about any country I really visit, just being able to immerse myself in the culture, really stay away from the super touristy spots, and get a sense of like what real Italy was all about. So that was something that was incredible for me. I think one of my favorite memories of you and I from the trip is from a small restaurant we went to on a food tasting tour, and they had really, really yummy homemade gnocchi, and we had a glass of wine with the local guide, and it was just like super cozy and very intimate in a way that it felt like you're in somebody's living room. So that's sort of like the kind of experience that I love the most.
That makes me so hungry and so nostalgic.
Yeah, it is lunchtime, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I love also about Italy. Like I I plan trips for people all over the world. And probably I would say I always tell my clients, like about 60% of my business is planning trips to Italy because of that local flavor. Like I work only with small companies. So I get to talk to local people who live there, who build these companies, like who raise them, like we're raising our own business here, like, it's like their babies. And they put so much heart and soul into everything that they do. Like they're so excited when you come to their restaurant or you stay at their little boutique hotel or you come to visit their winery or farm. Like they're the families who, these farms and wineries, they owned by the same families for centuries. So like it's an honor for them to host you there. So like every time, like I'm glad you had that firsthand experience. And when I visit and when I tell my clients, everybody says like, oh my God, it's like the most incredible experience because of that love and that care and that cultural, like they're just like so welcoming and open-hearted. It's very hard for me to find that in other countries, not to say that that doesn't exist. So I'm not trying to knock down any other cultures, but for some reason with Italy, it was such a natural partnership for me because like every time I go to a conference and I meet a bunch of new to me tour operators or hoteliers, like I always try to pick out the little mom and pop ones that really offer that family welcoming experience. So I'm super happy that you had that amazing experience on your first trip to Italy.
I did, and I can, honestly, and you know this about me, I can rave about Italy for days. So who wants to hear me go on and on about it? I
Hey,
think,
I
like I
do.
said, sure. I think once you experience Italy, you leave a little piece of your heart there. You always want to come back and see more. There's so many new places to visit. I mean, I can probably just keep going back to Venice, every month if I could.
Yeah. Every city in Italy, obviously I haven't seen every single place in every single city, but every city has its own charm. And I know Milan is a bit different than other places because it's one of the newer additions. Um, and it's much more modern than a lot of medieval places that people typically go visit. Like, for example, if you compare Milan and Florence, like Milan is probably hundreds of years younger than Florence. So I'm just curious, how did Milan compare to your expectations of Italy since it was your first encounter with the country?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question, actually. So I've been to, I don't know, probably like at least 15 countries in Europe, and um, Milan is definitely very urban. It's more contemporary. When you think of old Italy, you picture places like Florence or Siena or, other places like that. So Milan is sort of like the much younger, cool, hip Italian cousin.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And was there anything that exceeded your expectation or maybe disappointed you?
So, in terms of disappointment, I'll start with that first. There wasn't much punctuality, so that as a New Yorker, I'm sort of always very fast paced, and
Yeah.
I'm used to things being on time or like as you expect them. And this always bugs me in any city. So this is not about Italy specifically. I think it's just maybe a personal thing. So when I'm on a vacation or any trip, really, I have a limited amount of time to see the sights, and I don't expect my tours to be late consistently. So that is one of the things that happened. And also the shopping. Let's talk about that. So there was not much in between, like the truly luxury brands like Chanel, Prada, and Gucci, and things that were sort of fast fashion, low end things. I want something in between: quality, fashionable, Italian, stylish, and things that won't fall apart after a week. So those are like my two big things.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. And the thing about punctuality, yes, when the tour is late, it's pretty annoying, especially if you have to like wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to get to like the tour pickup that's supposed to be like at 7, and they don't show up until 8 o'clock. Like that bothers me too. So being late by an hour is not okay, but we also have to take into account the cultural differences. So like if somebody's late by like 15-20 minutes in Italy is like totally acceptable. We are, as New Yorkers, as former New Yorkers, so used to like the New York minute, everything is fast, fast, fast. Even in US, like if we travel to a different city, a different state, and things are much slower, we're like, what is going on? Why is everything so slow? But yeah, I agree. That punctuality is not the strong suit of Europeans in general, I would think. I think they just live a much more relaxed pace of life, and they're like, 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there. That even happened with me on during the conference when I had set appointments and people would like show up 30 minutes late, and I was like, what do you mean? Like your time slot was 30 minutes ago, like now I have somebody else. And shopping, yeah, I was disappointed with that as well, because unfortunately a lot of artisanal places out of business. They cannot survive the competition of cheap Chinese knockoffs and the big brands that are um, in major malls and major shopping areas carry like the very expensive brands, like we know, the Gucci products, etc. And that's definitely was not our budget for shopping when we were there. So we were both a little bit disappointed. But we did have some free time to explore the city beyond the shopping. And I'm glad that we splurged and did a private food tasting one night, which turned kind of into like private shopping tour, because of course we could not have passed by those few artisanal shops that we did come across. I was like, oh my god, there are stores that are not Zara and Gucci here.
Right, of course.
I probably set a personal record of how quickly I bought a pair of boots. I would say probably under 10 minutes, because we didn't have more time. I walked in, I saw them in the window. I'm like, we have to stop. Like, even if we miss one food tasting, we have to stop. I need these boots. Put them
I
on.
think it was 4 minutes. Sorry to interrupt you. I think it was 4 minutes. I
wouldn't
think
be
the
surprised.
guide was very surprised that you were like, okay, forget the food. We're going in. I see some
Yeah.
cool boots. We're going in.
And she was like, wait, you're ready to buy? I'm like, yeah, we don't have time. Like, I'm buying these boots. We have to go. But it's interesting because it's pretty incredible how much we got to see and taste and discover with a guide in 3 hours versus doing it on our own each night. Because that's one thing that I always get into a bit of a heated discussion with clients, because they're like, oh, we just want to explore on our own. And I'm totally for that. Like, you need time to get lost in cities and Borgos and these little villages and just, sit and sip a cup of coffee or a glass of wine. But if you want to see a lot, we saw so much more with the guide. And like, she knew where to take us. She knew like which restaurants to stop by, which stores were worth it. So I think it's definitely worth money, an experience worth spending money on.
Yeah, I agree. I think going with a private guide really gives you an advantage. You get to have a personalized experience and then skip things that don't interest you. So in Bologna, I was able to communicate with the tour guide, and talk to her ahead of time and tell her like, hey, I'm really into these things and not into these other things. So we were able to custom tailor my experience to my preferences and the things that I wanted to see, so I wouldn't feel rushed, and also I would get to see everything that I wanted on a limited time that I had.
Yeah, and that's a great point, being able to talk to the guides, or at least to talk to their company that's providing the guides ahead of time, because I had an experience on one of my trips to Italy where I did book a private guide, and she was a fantastic guide, but the company that was arranging it for me, they didn't ask me. I said, like, I want to go wine tasting, and I was going for a conference. I had like half a day free, so they were supposed to pick me up at the airport in Pisa where I landed and take me to Montecatini Terme where the conference was. So I had maybe like 6 hours of free time. So I said, pick me up. I've been to Pisa before, so I don't need to see the Leaning Tower, but Pisa is um, in Tuscany, so there's plenty of wineries. I said, I want to have lunch at a winery, and I want to explore Lucca. So they didn't really ask me much. Like, I ended up spending probably a good 2 and 3 hours at the winery, having super leisurely lunch, very slowly. I had a great conversation with the owners of the winery, but the winery was super modern. So like, if I knew that the winery would look like this metal box with like cut out holes and super, super modern, which is cool, but wasn't really what I was looking for. Also, I didn't need to spend 3 hours having lunch there and drinking wine. I'm not a huge wine drinker to begin with. But then when we went to Lucca, and that's the time I wanted to spend more time in Lucca, like just exploring this little pedestrian city, the center, maybe stopping by a few stores. I had like 30 minutes. So thinking back, I was like, they should have really asked me what I wanted to do. So now when I book private tours for my clients anywhere, I always ask them, like, what are you interested in? Are you into wine? Are you into food? Do you want to walk around? Do you want shopping? So then like the private tour can be customized. Otherwise, it's just another pre-arranged tour. It's just there are no other people on the tour there. So,
right, and
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just from the feedback that I've heard from people that I know who've traveled with you, that's a huge differentiator from booking something yourself on like Expedia or whatever. Your tours are all personalized and custom, to the person or the couple who are booking with you. So I think that's really important, because you get to know the client and which operator would be a good fit for them. So I think that's the one of the main reasons people should really look to booking with a travel expert.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And that's why I try to travel to destinations as much as I do, because nothing beats experiencing it on your own skin, if you can say it that way, because then you learn a lot of things, not only the destination, but also little quirks from the logistics standpoint. So it's a very, very different experience than just booking something off a menu, quote unquote, online. Like, a lot of people like, oh, I can book, a wine tasting in Tuscany through Viator or Expedia, but you have no idea who you're booking with. You have no idea what kind of theme that tour will have, because wine tasting can be very different from, from one company to another. You don't know if it's going to be personalized. You don't know who's going to be with you on that tour bus, and especially now with the COVID environment, everybody's trying to be as safe as possible. So having either a completely private guide and guided tour where you have your own little car, if it's a few of you, or if it's a family, you can have a little minivan taking you around, so you're not exposing yourself to other people being in the same car with you. It's a very different experience than just booking something off the menu, if you will. So that being said, we talked about Milan, we talked about regions around Milan. Maybe, Tanya, you have some tips you would like to share with us about traveling to Italy or traveling to Milan in general, especially for solo travelers, since you were traveling alone for the most part.
Yeah, so back to my earlier point, I think, you should expect that tours will start late and run late from my experience. And again, this is not to generalize all tours, but the ones that I have taken over a few trips have run late and have started late. So my point there is, don't overbook yourself. So if you think that a tour is going to end at 5:00 and you have to be somewhere at like 5:30 or 6, just be careful. Build in extra time for that transition. Stuff happens. If there's weather or traffic, you just need to build in a little extra time so you can sit and enjoy a cup of coffee and, just have a leisurely experience and not feel rushed and like nervous, like, oh, am I going to make my train, or am I going to, make whatever else that's next on the agenda. So the trains, in my experience, have actually been wonderful and on time and really reliable. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely.
What else?
Don't wait for the train. Don't think the train is going to be 15 minutes late, because that's one thing that's actually on time in Italy and pretty much all over Europe. So you can't count on that. Like if it's a bus tour, privately owned or operated, that's a different story. But trains are pretty much on time. So that's a good point.
Yeah, I think if it says it's a 1 p.m. train, like 1 p.m. is in like you are on board and the doors are closing, the train is pulling away at 1 p.m.
Yeah.
So it's not like 1 p.m.-ish. It's like literally 1 p.m. you could see the train leaving the station. So just, build extra time for that. And that goes for travel really anywhere. Places like Norway too. I mean, their trains, and Switzerland, they run like clockwork. So you have to really make sure that you're there. But enough said about that. So one of my best memories was sitting with locals in a cafe in Venice at 7:30, having a cappuccino and just like people watching. So just, take the time. Don't feel like you have to rush and see it all. You have to have downtime to really enjoy the city, watch the people, interact with the coffee, the person who's selling you the coffee, have a conversation, talk to the person in, that cool vintage clothing store, whatever. So just enjoy yourself and really get to like feel the soul of the city and like interact with the people. And I think that was really cool for me. And cappuccino note, Italians do not drink cappuccinos after like 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
So you only see Americans having cappuccinos like in the middle of the day. You'll get an eye roll if you order a cappuccino at like, 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah. I think it's like after lunch. I think like until lunch you can have a cappuccino, or maybe like 11 o'clock, and then that's it. Like you can't have cappuccino after that.
Yeah, that's how they know you're a tourist if you order cappuccino in the afternoon. That's just a side note. Yes, I think that's my biggest tip, is just enjoy yourself.
I just like had this image of us, which we didn't do, but I just for some reason thought of it, like having pizza and cappuccino at like 2 p.m. in Venice. Something that like both things people don't do there.
Yeah, in the plaza in San Marco Square, right?
Actually, you know what? We did have, now that I said that, we did have pizza in Venice for dinner one of the nights. Remember when we like ended up going back to the same restaurant? We had the first night we had dinner there with like a crew of girls from conference, and then we went on our own, and actually we did have pizza.
Oh yeah. So, that pizza was fantastic, yeah. But again, that was sort of off the beaten path on like a little side street that you'd never know. And I think actually we had a hard time finding it the second time around.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't really like in the most touristy area. I think it was much more residential and stuff. And like, yeah, that place was just fantastic. The food was great.
Yep. So we've been talking a lot about Venice, and we said like, oh, we went to Milan. So people are probably like, what are they talking about? So the first time we went to Milan in February, we fell in love with the culture. We fell in love with being away from our kids for 3 days. Not that we don't like our kids, we just really like some time off from my being around 24/7. So the next time I had an opportunity to go to a conference was that same last year as well, but it was in October. And it was a very different experience because obviously October is like the peak travel season versus February. So even though in February, like we had during the day weather of like 60 degrees, which was really unusual, but we got lucky. But when we went in October, we flew into Venice and then we got to visit San Marino, which is an independent republic inside Italy. And we saw a beach town, Rimini. So it was a similar trip where the first 2 days we got to explore Venice and the area. And then I was at the conference meeting with more new local partners and travel suppliers. And like I said, learning about interesting places and experiences that is really authentic that I can bring back home to my clients. And you, Tanya, were doing more of a hands-on, more like feet-on learning experience in the region. So you ended up going to Veneto, right? The region where Venice is, so outside of Venice. And you saw a lot of Emilia Romagna places. But I think like I can surely say that we definitely both fell in love with Venice. It's like it has a spell on us. It's just like so weird. And we were very, very lucky to see it right before the historic and tragic Acqua Alta, the flooding that took place, I believe it was like mid-November, so right about a month before. And for those of you who are not familiar with Acqua Alta, it's pretty much the water rises in Venice every year around that time in the winter. And the Venetians are pretty used to it. Like even when we were walking around the city, we saw these weird things that we didn't know what they were. It's like wooden top and metal legs. It kind of looks like tables, but they were upside down, like to the side of the streets. And when we asked someone what it was, they told us that these are kind of like the pathways that they will build once the water rises, so you can walk above the water. But last year, it was a really historic, unprecedented event. I think maybe it happened before, like hundreds of years ago, but the water was so high that it flooded hotels. It flooded the main St. Mark's Square with the cathedral, and lots of restaurants and lots of shops and hotels had to close down. And the winds and the tide was so high that for those of you who know or don't know, Venice is a carless city. So everything is delivered by boat. You can only walk or you can take a vaporetto, which is a ferry, public ferry. And I've seen a picture of a ferry like on the side of the street because the tide was so high and the winds were so strong that it just kicked out like this humongous ferry for like 300 people onto the side of this tiny street. So it was really heartbreaking to see, not to mention everything that happened to Italy during COVID, but COVID kind of affected the whole world. But Acqua Alta really, really took a toll on Venice. And now Venice is cleaned up and back to normal. They are doing renovations in a lot of historic places so people can start visiting them again. I believe the St. Mark's Cathedral reopened, and Italy is reopened after COVID. So it's kind of back to normal, but we were so lucky to get to experience the city before that craziness took place. So speaking of Venice, and like I mentioned, like it kind of like the city has a spell on us, on both of us. Like every time we talk about going away or we talk about Italy, we just talk about Venice, even though we've seen other places. Tanya, like, what do you think? Like, honestly, like, I don't know. Like, what do you think is like, what does Venice have so interestingly or differently or uniquely that it has like the spell on us? Like, why?
I don't know. That's really hard to pinpoint. I think it's unlike any European city I've been to, and I've seen quite a few, having lived in Europe, having traveled extensively. There's something special about it. It has an ancient charm. It's got really beautiful, windy streets that are sort of cool and mysterious. And I think one of the most fun things for me to do was just to walk around and get lost. And I'm really good with maps. And Anna, you know this about me. I can figure my way around anywhere. So
Yep.
it's beautiful. It's very serene. Even if you're just pulling up to it on the the private taxi from the airport, the boat, it has a magical feeling to it, and I just can't put my finger on it. It's beautiful. It's one of the places I'd love to go back to and see all over again, because I think it just doesn't get old. You can visit many times, and I don't say that about a lot of places. There are, very few places I'd like to go back to a second time, just because I feel like there's so much more out there in the world to see. But Venice is just magical.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. A lot of times people make a mistake of even not even staying in Venice. They'll just come for a day trip. They'll stay somewhere else. And Venice has been struggling a lot with day trippers. I think Venice even was supposed to, before COVID happened, it was supposed to institute a daily tax, like visitor tax, because there's so many cruise ships that come and so many day trippers that come that they bring so much garbage to the city that city is struggling to take all the garbage out. And like I mentioned, it's a carless city, so they have to bring boats to take the garbage out. We actually saw garbage being picked up on one of the mornings when we were leaving for the airport. It was interesting to see like this little tiny boat came by, and a person who was working on the boat picked up the garbage, but it's so much more expensive to take it out by water. So a lot of people who come to visit Venice just come for the day, for a couple of hours. They take a picture by the Rialto Bridge. They take a picture at the St. Mark's Square, like the two places that were crazy, insanely crowded. Probably I would say from like noon until like 7 p.m., which is the time frame when cruise ships dock, and Venice is a cruise ship city. And then like when we arrived in the morning, it was so peaceful and quiet. And I was like, wow, Venice is so quiet. Like people say it's so crowded, but I would not recommend anyone to just do a day trip there. Like, yes, it's expensive. Venice is the most expensive city in Italy. But it's so worth it. It's so worth to stay a couple of days, not even a couple, I would say at least 3-4 days, to really slow down, to enjoy the culture, to get, like you said, get lost in the little streets, try every cicchetti you can, which are like the little tapas, like little sandwiches with all kinds of different toppings, and explore the islands outside of the main city of Venice. So they have Murano, where they make the famous Murano glass, Burano, where they make the famous lace, and another island of Torcello. So all of that will take 3, 4, 5 days if you want to explore it leisurely. And when people say like, oh, I want to, visit Venice for a day, like my mind just blows up, because I don't know what to tell them to visit, because they'll probably end up being there during the rush hour and they're going to hate it. So if you have time, spend as much time as you can in Venice, enjoy it, and you'll come out from this experience with a very, very different memories than if you were there just for a day trip.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Sorry to interrupt you there. I think a couple of days is really important to spend in Venice. You don't want to rush it. You don't want to be there just for the 5 hours with the rest of the cruise ship folks. I think you really need to just make sure you give the locals business, eat in the restaurants that are off the beaten path, visit the stores, walk around, really enjoy the city.
Yep. And thinking of other places that we really enjoyed, I know we both loved San Marino that I mentioned earlier. It's a sovereign city-state inside Italy. So if you go there, you can count that as another country on your bucket list that you visited. It was really a hidden gem. Like, I've heard about it, but I've never really looked into it before. And because we were in Rimini for the conference, it was like a 30-minute drive to San Marino. We're like, might as well, let's go see it. It was fantastic. It was so beautiful and had incredible restaurants and like Michelin star restaurants and Michelin star hotels, and it's totally off the beaten path. There were not a lot of people there. We had a fantastic time like that afternoon. Like, we shopped, we got some great bargains for like actual artisanal leather goods, and we got some soaps and scarves, and prices were definitely much better than in Venice. And they were, like I said, artisanal, like made in Italy, local designers, not the cheap Chinese knockoffs. So we definitely I know we both loved our day trip to San Marino. So next time we're going to Rimini conference, where I think we're going to spend a couple of days in San Marino, not just an afternoon. But do you have anything to add to that experience?
Yeah, I'd love to go back. It was super cool and historic. It's a beautiful walled city. It's built on a series of hills. It's overlooking Italy. You can see down to the Adriatic Sea and the coast on one side. It's very picturesque. The food was fantastic. We actually met one of the restaurant owners who I think was from New York, and she was so happy to see us, and like the food was just like really delicious and fresh, and the shopping was great. I mean, I can't say enough about it. I highly recommend a visit to San Marino.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely on my revisit bucket list along with Venice and a couple of other places. So, Tanya, I wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time to talk about Italy. I know we can spend the whole day talking about it, but we'll have to get back to real life and probably hungry mouths that are crying for lunch and husbands who need help with whatever, like back to real life. I do have a little surprise that I wanted to do. So I decided that for my series of interviews, I'm going to do a series of rapid questions, like silly rapid questions. Whatever the first thing that comes to your mind, just answer, shoot it out. It's nothing personal, nothing crazy. I'm not going to reveal any secrets.
PG-13.
PG-13, absolutely. A lot of them are family or travel related, but I think it would be a fun way to end
let's do it.
our little conversation. So if you could travel back in time, what period would you go to?
Oh, that's amazing. That's really hard to pick. I would say I would probably go back to the early to mid 17th century in the time of Da Vinci and just experience Italy in its glory during the Renaissance, and also just, when all the innovation and like the cool stuff was happening, and just to be able to see some of these things, some of these historic landmarks being built, and just, that would be amazing.
That would be, just don't forget to bring some deodorant with you, because I don't think they had running water.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think the Romans had some sort of running water or baths, centuries ago. But yeah, I'll have to look into that to pinpoint a better specific date.
Yeah, I just remember that tour we had in one of the castles outside of Venice when we were looking at this humongous painting of this, I don't know, some kind of a baroness or something like that. And she had like this fancy dress, and then she had like a tail of some kind of, like, I think fox or something hanging off of her wrist. And the guide kept asking that, like, they're like, oh, why do you think she has this animal tail next to her? Like, and everybody was like lost. Like, well, we don't know. And they said something along the lines that, like, because they didn't like shower every day, they thought that having like an animal tail would like scare off all the bad smells from them. So like every time I think of like the medieval times, I'm like, oh geez, I don't want to have to carry an animal tail with me and not be able to shower. Okay, so that was number one. Number two, place you most want to travel right now.
Literally anywhere outside of my house. Actually, so I think Malta is really high on my list. It just looks incredible. It's one of the places I really wanted to visit, and I think it's like a cool, like mixture of a Croatia and Italy, that kind of vibe. So I think I would really enjoy that with my family. So hopefully sometime next year, maybe. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, that'd be nice. What's your favorite carb? Bread, pasta, rice, or potatoes?
Hey, I'm from Ukraine. Potatoes all the way. Baked, fried, home fries, French fries, you name it. Potatoes.
Yep, sounds good to me. Climb a mountain or jump from a plane?
Oh, climb a mountain.
Okay. Safe one. Safe choice. What's the most embarrassing store you might have been seen shopping at?
I don't think I've been to an embarrassing store.
I don't think we've been to any stores in the last 6 months.
Well, yeah, that's true too. Embarrassing. No, I think I'm pretty easygoing about anything. Like, I'm not, if I'm shopping for myself, my husband, my son, whoever, like, I'm not really, I don't get embarrassed very easily with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, I don't have a better answer.
Ask permission or beg forgiveness?
I think it depends on the situation.
Right. Okay. And the last one is, what's for dinner tonight?
Whatever my husband's going to throw on the grill and barbecue, so I don't have to cook.
Yeah, I hope it doesn't rain, because that was my plan as well.
Oh, shoot. Yeah, that would not be a good idea. So I guess I'd better go look in the fridge.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. This has been a lot of fun. I'm so excited we finally made it happen. Um, I want to have you back at some point so we can talk more about Italy and other places. And yeah, enjoy your day with your boys. Good luck with not having rain, so that you don't have to cook dinner. And we'll be in touch soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always great to talk to you. I miss you. Hopefully we'll have some fun travels sometime soon when things go back to normal.
Absolutely, I look forward to that as well. All right, ciao for now. Thanks so much for listening. I am so happy we got to record this episode because it has been in the works for a while. If you want to support the podcast, the number one thing you can do is share it on your Instagram, in the stories or in the feed, and don't forget to tag Olegana Travel Boutique. This helps me get the word out so I can get even more amazing guests on the show. If you can't wait to start creating your own dream itinerary to Italy, I can't wait to help you get started. First of all, head to the show notes and download our free 100 Italy travel tips. This guide will be the most valuable Italy travel advice tool in your trip planning toolkit. Head to oleganatravelboutique.com and click on Plan Your Trip and schedule a free consultation so we can get started on your trip. However, if you don't feel comfortable planning anything just yet or putting anything on the calendar, no problem. We can start planning, but you don't have to pay until much later. We can plan a trip without the specific dates. We can draft an itinerary, design experiences around everybody's interests, and when the time is right, we'll bring it to life. I'm here to help you no matter what you have in mind. Once again, thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, Olegana Travel Boutique Trips and Stories, so you don't miss our next episode. And if you enjoyed the show, please take a minute and leave your review. It will really make my day. Thanks again. Take care. You have been listening to Olegana Travel Boutique Trips and Stories podcast. Olegana Travel Boutique is a luxury travel agency. We specialize in completely custom-made trips and experiences for couples and families. I'm your host, Anna Fishman, owner and founder of Olegana Travel Boutique. Having traveled extensively through 27 countries, I have built incredible relationships with the most fascinating people in the travel space and have curated a personal vault of practical travel information that I'm so eager to share with you. From the best hotels and resorts around the world to agritourism mom-and-pop farms, from castle hotels to century-old wineries owned by the several generations of the same family, to the most unique and authentic, historic, cultural, and Epicurean experiences. Olegana Travel Boutique is your one-stop shop for jaw-dropping European itineraries. Want me to create one-of-a-kind custom trip for you? Let's chat. Grab a time on my calendar for a free consultation through a link in show notes. Thanks for listening. Ciao till next time.